Welcome to Tell the Damn Story, the show that explores the many ways to navigate the successes and failures that aspiring and struggling writers face to make your journey that much easier.
Hello, everybody. Hello, our regular audience, and hello to ECBACC. This is Chris Ryan, a hybrid author, both traditional and independent, and the legendary Alex Simmons, he of the brand new Sherlock Holmes and The Hands of Othello, which is coming out in a few days. And we don't even have time to talk about each other today because, ladies and gentlemen, today, Tell the Damn Story, courtesy of ECBACC, has gone international. Alex,
take it away.
Take it away. Let's talk about it.
I got the ball, coach. Okay. Yes, we have gone international in so many wonderful ways, and we have three wonderful artists with us today. I'm going to attempt to do this properly. We have Micheline Hess. Say hello there. There you go. And then we have Tayo, and I'm not going to do this right, Fatunla. Fatunla. Oh, I don't see an L in there. Fatunla. Yeah. That's what we're throwing.
I see the L.
Tayo Fatunla. All right.
Yes.
And we have
Correct.
Jesse Sunkwa-Mills. Is that right? Okay, good. And would you each take a moment to tell a little bit about yourself? Because today we're going to talk about comics, graphic novels, storytelling, and the global power that comes from this experience, and how three people have actually moved on that trail. Yes, Chris.
Just so the audience knows, we have different countries and different worlds represented here. Alex is on the planet the Bronx. I'm way in the end of the universe, New Jersey. We have Micheline, she's in New York. Tayo's in the UK, and Jesse's come to us from Ghana. So we're truly global today, and we're going to talk about, as far away as we can be, it's art that unites us, and we need that these days.
Never.
Yeah.
So let us start with Micheline. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, my name is Micheline Hess of Mishmash Arts. I'm coming into comics actually from originally doing ad work professionally and a lot of web design and things. Now I do comics almost full time. And I first got into comics as a kid, actually, and it was because my father was bringing home comics from all around the world on the business trips he went on. And a lot of times I didn't understand the language in the comics, but it was the visual narrative that really pulled me in. So this episode, I'm really excited to be a part of it, and I'm looking forward to chatting with everyone.
A little international moment there, right? Tayo.
Hello, my name is Tayo Fatunla. I was born in London, raised in Nigeria, and schooled in America. And I think America made a difference in my career in studying at a Cuban school in New Jersey. And since then, my creation, our roots, actually started from the school almost about 30-something years ago, 1984, should I say, around 1984. It kicked off when I went back to Nigeria. And through the years, I've done several works for the BBC, British Museum, Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., as well as Hunger Against Africa. First, I've forgotten the name now. I'll get that. But I've just done several works for several organizations locally and internationally. I relocated to UK in 1989 after my cartoon career in Nigeria, and I'm of Nigerian heritage. And since 1989, I've been doing drawings on international African perspective. Yeah, and the other name I wanted to mention was Action Against Hunger, which won an award about 2 years ago for the drawings I did for them, as well as the BBC's as well. I'm really thankful to be part of this podcast meeting.
Excellent.
Glad to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. Jesse, or Jess.
Yeah, whichever one is fine. Hi, everyone. My name is Jesse Sunkwa-Mills. Simple terms, I'm a filmmaker, an animator, and I'm the CEO and creative director of a studio in Ghana, West Africa called Mills Media. I founded Mills Media sometime in 2016. And just the lady mentioned earlier, sorry, her name skipped me, but we started off as a full service creative firm, basically to offer creative solutions to individuals, to companies, whatnot. But the dream had always been to use animation, comics, and games to tell and project the African story and the African culture to an international audience. And for a very long time, we weren't able to achieve that up until from 2019, where we put out our very first comic book and mobile game. And then we had a short proof of concept of a film that we had always wanted to make, which was the film I sent to you. And in 2022 was when, for the very first time, we were able to release our first ever 3D animated film. And that would be the very first 3D animated film to go to cinema ever in my country. And it also went on to do so well, sold out the entire cinemas. It went on to win awards locally, internationally. And since then, yeah, we've been making films every year, taking to cinema to exhibit, taking around for film festivals. And yeah, pretty much that's what we've been doing, basically to use animation, comics, and games to project and to tell the African story to the rest of the world. And that's what we're doing. And it's exciting to be here to get to talk about it too. Yeah.
Excellent. Yes.
Excellent.
And if I remember from your background, 3 years in a row,
Yeah.
your films have sold out the cinemas in Ghana and then moved on to other success. That's building a great track record.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I'm curious because, again, as Chris pointed out, a number of the people that listen to our show or watch our show on YouTube are aspiring or emerging or struggling artists. And it's always a good supportive moment to hear how someone started, how we push through whatever to get to wherever we are. So we would like to just go around and just get a little bit of your origin story.
Yeah. Well, for example, everybody, Alex Simmons got his first sketch pad. It was on the back of Noah's Ark, and he's been creative ever since. Sorry, I'm contracted to have one age joke an episode. That was it.
Yeah.
I'll behave.
Yeah. Yes. Chris likes to point out that I may be the elder in the room, and that's okay. I'm still breathing.
Just a little
But
bit.
yeah,
Just a
we
little
all
bit.
started somewhere at some point, maybe in our childhood or maybe in our early teens. We got bitten by the bug. Let's just start with, again, whoever would like to go first. Raise your hand. Who would like to go first and share that start? Oh, okay.
Micheline.
When I was a kid, we were living in Brooklyn in Flatbush, and I would go behind my brother to this store called Te Amo, and they sold candy there. But they also sold comics there. It was very common for comics to be sold in candy stores, and they would have magazines and stuff like that. And so some of the first comics I ever bought were like Wendy the Witch. I remember buying a copy of Devil Dinosaur because it had a red dinosaur on it, and I just found that immensely enchanting. But like I was saying before, yeah, my father would travel to different parts of the world on business, and he would come back. And there were times when I would get these comics where Black people were not being portrayed in the kindest light. I remember one comic in particular was like Le Pied Nickelé, like the way they would draw their characters was not all right. But it didn't always stick with me. Like I wasn't always thinking about making comics, but I drew all the time, and my parents really encouraged that. And I loved watching cartoons. It wasn't until I found myself working retail. I graduated from college. I was very fortunate to go to college, but I found myself having graduated and just having no idea what I wanted to do with my life. It was causing a lot of friction in the home. And yeah, I was working downtown. I was working in the museum gift shop for the Guggenheim satellite store in Soho, wrapping up like wine carafes that looked like the Eiffel Tower or whatever. And then one day my mom told me that Milestone was looking for staff. They were taking on staff. And so I quit my job immediately. I was just like, okay, bye. I don't recommend that, but that's what happened. And I had a little computer. I had a Power Mac 120, and I put together a portfolio of sorts and brought it there and just was bothering them until finally they gave me a job as a colorist working under Jason Scott Jones. He was the lead colorist there. And so he was teaching me how to use the different inks and the different colors that they use. They use like these permanent watercolor inks, so oxymoron. And I did static. I worked on Icon. I did cover for Shadow Cabinet and some other things. And I didn't see any further past making it. I just was like there. I was like, made it, Ma. Look, I'm painting. And that didn't last that long. And then they shut down the doors and I went straight back behind the cash register that I was standing behind before. And so I put comics out of my mind for a really long time. And it wasn't until much, much later that I was working for Nickelodeon as a designer. And I just found myself in a situation where I didn't want to get to a point where my vision was even worse or my hands were even more gnarled. And I was like, I could have been a great comic artist. And they're just like, that's nice, Miss S. Take your medication. So that's when I started working on Malice in Ovenland. And I started with one book, and then one issue became 4 issues, and then it became a trade paperback, and it was onward from there. But I think that was the point that I finally started making stories for myself. I made another story called the Anansi Kids Club and the All Saints Day Adventure back then, which was something that really allowed me to dive into West Indian culture and explore different things about where my mom was from, which is from the island St. Vincent, which is in the Grenadine Islands. And that was the beginning, or maybe the beginning of the end. I don't know. From there, it got better and better, or worse, more intense, and I kept wanting to use that medium as a way of telling stories.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, wow. Who's next? Who's next? Keep this flow.
I had a similar experience with Micheline as well when I was young in Nigeria. I was in primary school then, and primary school. And my mother was a nurse, and she would come home with comics from Britain and from America, and I fell in love with comics straight away. And my first comic actually in primary school, which is I don't know what it's called in American, I've forgotten now. It was a pocket book called Thor. It was then called the Mighty Thor. I said, wow, a human being flying. I've never seen that before. And I got interested in that and interested in British comics as well. And through the years, through my education, I started drawing in school. And I started selling my drawings and giving out my comics, pencil drawn, and giving them out with a small amount of money for students reading the comics. So from there, after my secondary education in Nigeria, I went to the Kibbutz School of Cartoon and Graphic Art in New Jersey, flew over there. Being the first international student there, I was able to gain more experience as to drawing. But prior to that, I was in Nigeria, already being a famous cartoonist in Nigeria, but I thought I could still do better than what I was doing. So I wanted plan B, which was a better education in knowing how to draw. And that's when I went to the Kibbutz School. And it was at the Kibbutz School, at the end of the school year, my last year in school, I came up with this visual called African Sketchbook, which was a project we had to do to prepare us for the real world. And the African Sketchbook is what is called our roots now. And my first trip from New Jersey then to New York was on a bus, on a coach. And it's, wow, New York just looked large, massive to me. And I said, wow, this is a great experience for me. I really enjoyed it then. But when I was there, I noticed that the interest in Black history was just mainly within America. And I thought that here I am as a Nigerian, of Nigerian heritage, that if I should go back to Africa, I won't be able to do much of African Americans, but I'd love to do also Africans in the diaspora. And that's how our roots took off. And when I relocated to Britain, the strip was changed from African Sketchbook. Actually, when I was at school, African Sketchbook was my first A+ in school. And I was so happy. That's a project I really was enthusiastic in doing. And it really took off the ground very well. And from Britain, it was published for almost about 13 years or so, every week, Voice newspaper in London. And from there, it just took off. People just loved what I did, on educating about Black history in the diaspora, not just in America, in diaspora, in America, in Africa, in New Zealand, in Europe, in the Caribbean. So I was able to educate about Black history. And it was Mandela that said, education is the most powerful weapon in which you can use to change the world. Education is the most powerful weapon in which you can use to change the world.
Yeah.
And I was able to use our roots to educate children. I would get notes, then letters or emails from schools in America, from teachers, asking where did I get my information from. So I had to read and summarize all what I read about a particular person into about 50 to 60 words, because I knew all along that children were not ready to read a voluminous book quite big of several pages. So I was able to summarize the history of one particular person or personality into about 50 to 60 to 70 words. And our roots, like I say, is very historical as well, and educational, historical, and entertaining as well, and very informative. And the rest, they say, is history. And because of that, like I said earlier on, I've got the British Museum saying they like our roots, gave me a project on African kingdoms for the museum, and also did for the BBC as well. So I've had various organizations actually get me to do work for them, and even Action Against Hunger, like I said earlier on, because of our roots. So our roots has done great things for me. It's not just our roots and not just drawings on Black history. I also do editorial cartoons as well. And I've had challenges along the way, but I'm glad that I've been successful in that area.
Excellent.
Jesse.
All right. Yes, I guess I go next. Yeah, maybe just like Fatunla, and my journey also started when I was just a little boy, and I just had so much interest in animation. I was excited about what really went into the whole arts and science of how they're able to get the characters to move. My parents would get me 10 comic books, you know. Yeah, and I would read them, and I'll draw a lot when I was a kid. Draw in sketchbooks. I'll draw and even mail them to my relatives abroad and all of that. And that's how much I loved to draw. So when I started growing up and watching a lot of animations and cartoons, the more my interest even grew a lot more. And I really wanted to get to understand the whole arts and science behind how they're able to get these characters to move. And it was up until I entered the university that I got introduced proper to animation and how animation is done and whatnot. But even with that, it wasn't as deep as expected. And I had to do a lot of self-learning online and whatnot. And so once I came out of the university, I got the chance to work for a while with an ad agency. And so I had to do some bit of advertising, but then all along I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And that's to become a storyteller, making animation, making comics, making games, to tell my own stories, basically. And so, like I said, it was until 2016, that's exactly a year after I had just gotten into this ad agency, and I decided to quit one day and just start my own journey. It was difficult at first, but at some point, thankfully, I was able to get a hold of it. And just to be able to survive, I had to be doing a lot more ad or advertising related stuff. And I'm talking more of graphic designing, more of motion graphics, more of web designing. We would do some animation from time to time, but it was just very short ones. So then you'd have a 1 minute ad for a client who wants their products marketed and stuff like that. But all along, the plan or the goal was to be able to tell lengthy durations of animated films, basically.
Yeah.
And I was very much aware of the lack of resource when I'm talking about the machinery, the technical know-how, the lack of trained personnel. And then most importantly, you spoke about a pipeline or a production pipeline. And so that meant that I had to do several research. It took me several years to be able to research and finally get to a stage where I was sure and confident that if we were to start working on a film now, we will be able to get that film done. But then the only next challenge was funding, which from our part of the world, it's unfortunate, but you have little to no one pay you attention if you say oh, look, I've got this awesome idea. I want to tell this story in animation, and I need you to give me some money to do it. No one is really going to listen. And so I tried raising funds for my first film for 2, 3 years, and it never happened. And so the next thing I thought I could do or I should do was to self-fund it. And I would gather every little money I'd made at the time and personal funds and also funds that had also come in from doing gigs from clients and put all of that together. And we gave ourselves a whole year. That was from 2021 towards the ending of 2021 and the whole of 2022 to make our first film. Now, this, if you're from my part of the world, you'd understand that this was a very big risk we took because COVID had just happened. It took a big blow on my business. I lost a few members of my team because of the whole COVID thing, and things were just beginning to bounce back. And I decided to take another big risk in making a film, which I wasn't sure yet that we were going to be able to finish because, like I mentioned, no one at the time had done a lengthy duration of film in 3D and also taken to cinema yet. So it was quite a big risk we were taking. It had to work, else I probably would have been a very depressed person right now. I don't know what I'll be doing in my life.
I hear you. I hear
Yeah,
you.
it just had to work, and it did. And I'm glad that I took that risk. So we went an entire year, did nothing else.
Yeah.
We didn't take in any job. We didn't do any other thing. It was just the film, morning, afternoon, evening, dawn.
Sure.
And yeah, locked ourselves up. And finally, the film came out and it went to cinema and exceeded our expectations. Like it went over the roof. And ever since, our story has changed. People now take us serious when we say we're making a film. Even the cinemas where we exhibit these films at the beginning would charge us money to exhibit our own films. So we had to rent the halls. But now we go into a split revenue agreement with them because now they've seen what our films are able to do. And that's how it's been since. Yeah.
Excellent. Alex, one of the things I noticed was when Jesse was speaking, there's a couple of different times when everybody on the panel nodded their heads at once.
Yeah.
And I'd like to expand on some of that because I imagine that some of the people watching at ECBACC did the same thing. So the first thing that everyone nodded their head at was, Jesse, when you were talking about the requirement of solving the problem of self-education, how to find out what you need to know. And sometimes with all of us, it's find out what you don't know, where to begin and all that. So I'd like to go quickly around the panel and ask for each of you, what was the piece of self-education that you felt like it was a key to unlocking some of the doors and really get you moving forward? Because when Alex and I were kids, we didn't know that we shouldn't be doing what we were doing. Alex was making, one of his friends had a little camera and they were like jumping off garages and making adventures and going out in Central Park and having superhero fights. And I didn't know how limited my art skills were, but I knew my imagination was there and I created a whole world. It looked a lot like DC and Marvel, but I was 10. So what I'm looking for is those kind of things. What sparks did you find, or what self-education helped you start moving in the path you wanted to go? This time, can we start with Tayo?
Firstly, I had to be very original with my ideas because originality sells very well. But I was determined I wanted to be an artist, and I just pressed forward with that. And then I've never looked back since then because I loved drawings. My going into art wasn't to make money. I just enjoyed drawing. Sure. And then along came all the perks that goes along with doing and being successful in art. So I was determined, and it was determination that got me to go to America to study art as well, because I wanted to be toward that line of being an artist, comic artist, a cartoonist.
Is there a
as well.
moment there, Tayo? I'm sorry to interrupt. Is there a moment in that where you realized, yeah, whatever it takes, I have to do? Was it one particular piece of art or someone's reaction, or you stumbled upon an ad for the Qubit School? What was it that made you go, oh, that?
Cartoons in Nigerian newspapers.
Yeah?
And one particular one was called Soji Stupid, and also a cartoon strip I took over when I joined the Punch newspapers in Nigeria.
That's cool.
The moment I started saying cartoons in Nigerian newspapers, I said, yes, that's what I want to do. I could easily be a comic artist, but I wanted to be an editorial cartoonist for newspapers in Nigeria. But then again, I was buying Conan the Barbarian comic books. And that's where I saw at the back of one of the editions, the Qubit School advertised. I said, that's where I want to go.
I remember those ads. Those
I didn't
ads
want
were
to go to an
dynamic.
art school that they were teaching you how to paint and all whatnot. I wanted to be a comic artist. So when that Qubit School ad came along, I jumped at it, and the rest is history. And that's what got me going. And the moment I got to the school, I realized that yes, this is what I want to be. This is my future.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting to go to some school or some place and say, I'm home. Micheline, a similar moment of ignition for you.
Oddly enough, I think the point where I really got excited about taking some sort of self-study approach to honing an aspect of my craft was when I discovered the software Flash, which was put out by Macromedia, or some out for Macromedia. And I downloaded a trial software on dial-up. So I could start. I was so amazed that kind of feeling that Jesse speaks of, wanting to know how it's done. Like, how do you take this and make that? There weren't a lot of sites back then that had a ton of tutorials, because the internet was still, I was working for a company. I used Flash to actually get a job at a company called miningco.com, which they became about.com. That was my first digital job ever. And that was what really set me on that. So it was a combination of experimentation and also having to use some of my money to buy books.
Yeah.
And I would go through. Yeah.
Cool. Excellent. Jesse, we're coming back. You inspired this question. Now you got to answer it.
Yeah, it's pretty much a bit of what they both said. I'd always wanted to tell stories, basically, and I knew that if to be able to make that happen, then I'd have to get to know a lot more than I do from what I'd seen or what I'd been taught in school. And like I got the realization proper just around 2017, 18. And there's this video that I saw that really pushed me to start, because I would always procrastinate as artists would do. But there's a video that I still have to till date, and I would say inspired every other thing with regards to telling our stories. And it was just a 1 minute interview that was done for African kids. It was more of an experiment where these kids were asked a simple question about being black or being white, and it was likened to they asked them if they thought Jesus Christ was white or black. And these black kids all said Jesus Christ was white and the devil was black. And they were asked to describe the characteristics of these two people, and they said Jesus Christ was kind, he was good, he was all the nice stuff. And they said the devil was evil, the devil was deceitful, the devil was black, and all of that. And then they were asked what color are they, or who are they, and they were like, they're black. One kid who was really confused said she was fair. But that really got to me, and it really made me understand the power of film and the comics and whatnot, because these same kids said they were asked why they thought so, and they said, "Oh, it's because they had seen those in the films they were watching, like Superbook and all of that, and in the books that they were reading." And I'm like, if these kids are being programmed to think that being Black is evil and whatnot just because of something they had seen in their books and stuff that they're watching on TV, that's very serious. And we know what the Western world has been able to use film to do. We believe America has the best army in the world because of some of the films that we see, Air Force One, and like it's being depicted as the greatest country and whatnot. That's what film can do to you. And for me, that was like the wake up call for me. And I'm like, there's no need procrastinating and putting this on hold. And so I just had to start learning whatever I had to. I went online, learned so many more tutorials, how to build a proper pipeline to be sure that I can actually put a proper film together. So for me, that was it. Yeah.
I want to just jump in here because one of the things that's come out from each one of you, and I know Chris and I have talked about this throughout the years and with other guests that we've had, is a passion for what it is that you want to do with your life, or this thing that is so powerful within you that no matter how many years of distraction, delay, hardship, or whatever, I got to keep going at this. I got to keep going for this. I've got to get better at this. And the satisfaction that comes from that. And you've just mentioned, Jess, about the cultural aspect of your why
Yeah.
you pursued this. And
Yeah.
here we have a wonderful opportunity, and again, thanks to ECBACC for making this possible. This wonderful opportunity to look at passion and where we come from, and how does that impact on us as artists. And so I just would like to take a moment here to get some sort of a feedback from that. And I know Chris has a story I'm going to get him to tell. Despite this is not about us this time around, I'm still going to get him to tell this story because it had an impact on me when I heard it. But let's go with Micheline this time. Where you were brought up, who you are, how you felt about what you saw, how did that impact on or influence, if it did, your passion for art and eventually comics?
It's funny, my first memory of drawing anything was taking a purple magic marker and trying to draw Ernie and Bert on this closet door of our home. I don't remember very much after that. That could be for a variety of reasons. But my mom, who worked for the Board of Ed, recognized my desire to draw. And she would tell me this story about how she was trying to get me into this school. I think it was called Berkeley School or something. It was for the first grade. No, sorry, Montessori. Anyway, the guy would put each kid through a little aptitude test, and he had asked me to draw you and your family. And so I got to drawing, and 5 minutes later, he took the paper and he ran out to my mom and he was like, Mrs. Hess, look what your daughter drew. And she was like, she put a house and she put people, and then there's grass there and all this stuff that, like, I guess kids at that age generally don't include in their art. And so she started encouraging me even more. And in the fifth grade, it got really bad because I was drawing on everything, my homework, my desk, my notes, other people's clothes, other people's homework. So she entered me in the Art Students League of New York. And so I would go there on the Saturday, I think it was Saturday or Sunday, and I would do figure drawing and model drawing and things like that. And I feel like it was a while, it was sometime after I began to say, where are the comics? And you look at the interest in anime. I was really into anime back in the 90s, so much so that I was taking a Japanese class upstairs from the retail job that I worked at. So I noticed that they have this very rich cultural, showing through their anime. We did the gods and the goddesses and things like that. And that was something I wanted to explore, but it was very diffuse when I would be looking. And so I decided that I would make the first story about the Anansi kids, also attaching with my mom's childhood in the West Indies and having monsters like a Sukinya or Sukoyant, a skinwalker, in there because she used to talk about how they would tell her stories about that. And it was just a really great feeling to dive into that world and also build a world based on that, and say, this is our stuff. You know what I mean? This is our stuff. These are Black characters. Same thing with Malice in Ovenland, everyday Black characters who didn't necessarily have to be coming from a place of trauma or struggle or abuse. It could just be a kid, an ordinary everyday kid that goes on an incredible adventure and sees monsters and does battles and things like that. I was really attracted to that. And so I guess I was trying to create what I wanted to see. That was the biggest driver for me, wanting to create worlds and magical worlds and fantasy worlds that had Black characters in it, because that was just not something I really ever saw.
How about you, Jesse?
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much just like what Micheline was saying. That's why I kept nodding a lot. I believe representation matters a lot. And for a very long time, the African story has been left out of modern media, especially in our part of the world. Back in the days, storytelling used to be done under trees. You'd have old folks gather kids in the neighborhood by the fireside. That's what we call it. And we're told stories and history, stories of the past, some folklore and all of that. But along the line or over the years, when storytelling evolved from sitting under trees and being told stories to reading them as comics or, watching them as film, and even now interactive media, games and all of that, you would find that there really isn't enough of the African story. There's not enough representation. And just like Micheline was saying, I felt it was always nice, or it'd be wonderful to see Black animated characters doing awesome stuff, not necessarily stories about the usual slavery, bad stuff. Yeah, but there are a lot more beautiful stories that haven't been told yet. Stories about, just like what we did with Yasan, to our greatness, were kings and queens, basically projecting the true culture and heritage of the African people. And for me personally, that's what I seek to do using animation, comics, and games. And I feel that's like an awesome tool because then it cuts across a lot of demographics. Our country now, for instance, I can say that over the years, for 3 years now running, we've been able to build a huge fan base that as soon as they hear that we're bringing out a film, we in recent times do not even have to do so much work with advertising because they know what to expect. They're just excited. They're just waiting to see what production we're coming up with next, because finally they get to see some of these stories that were told to them by their older folks as kids. And it was just like folk tales or myths and whatnot come alive on screens. And it's told in the form of animation. It's even more beautiful for them. So they're excited, they're in a hurry. You'd find kids, you'd find older folks. As a matter of fact, when we do like a demographic check after our screenings and all, we find that there are even a lot more adults and young adults that show up to watch our films than even there are kids. Yeah, and that's for me is really exciting because now finally we get to tell our own stories. We get to own the narrative, control the story, tell it as it should be told, because for me, I still think it's a very powerful tool to show the rest of the world basically who we are. And that's what me I'm excited about. And that's what I want to be doing with animation. Yeah.
Excellent.
Tayo?
Tayo?
Yeah, and totally agree with what Jesse said and Micheline as well. Because if we look at the long and short of it, is that storytelling is essential to some of the images we put out there, for us to be able to tell our own stories as well. We're all storytellers, and Jesse said, I've got so many people come to me, young ones, up and coming ones, wanting to draw comics, and they mostly from Africa, and they're usually drawing superheroes, the superheroes we see all the time or in their own version. And I think with Jesse and his own points as well, I think we have lots of stories that can come out of Africa, which we haven't done yet. And I've suggested to some of the artists who draw like superheroes that why don't you do books and adapt a published book into a comic book, like Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart or Wole Soyinka's Kongi Harvest, and some other great authors in Africa whose books have done very well, but we're yet to see them in a graphic novel format. I know that in America, a few African American artists have drawn books and graphic novels on Mandela, or Martin Luther King, or Malcolm X.
Sure.
I'd like to see more of that and tell our stories through the years, because we need to tell more stories than ever before, because without telling a story for the future generation, there won't be anything to look back on or fall back on. So storytelling is very important in that which we do. And I tend to do that with my Black history drawings, our roots. And that's done very well. And I've had a stint of doing it in French as well, because I want to communicate to the French-speaking nationals as well. And telling a story that people would want to learn more about is very essential. And that's what's got me to what I'm doing now. And I'd like to continue to do more. But most importantly, we're all storytellers, and that helps a lot to tell stories in our career, artists and writers.
I'm not sure. Thank you for that, all three of you. I'm not sure if this is the story that Alex wants me to tell, but I'm going to take a chance and tell this story. When I was young, I stumbled across the story of a king. And when I read it, I was baffled as to why this wasn't like a cornerstone story for the world. And it was the story of Mansa Musa.
Yeah.
I pitched that to Alex.
Okay.
I pitched it for over a decade. One of the things I had to do was I had to prove to Alex that I could write his character Blackjack. And then I pitched a story that would surround the story of Mansa Musa, but in and told through the lens of Blackjack. And it wound up being this one here, which was Ransom for a Dead King. And we were able to, Mansa Musa is not my story to tell, and Blackjack's not my story to tell, but I could pitch it to Alex, and then he was like, let's write it together, and that kind of thing. And I was a real bubblehead growing up, and my father was, God bless him, was very protective about the racism in the world. So I was able to grow up reading everything and then as we hit teenage and I started seeing the world, I was like, wait, that's not exactly that's not the bill of goods I was sold. It's much more terrible. But that idea of, say, for example, Blackjack getting involved in a legend like that because the world should know about it. And that, Alex, you got to tell me if I'm telling the right story.
You're telling the right story.
That was such a passion for me, because I couldn't understand, why does not more people know about this? And there's whole sections of the world that are, if they ever hear this, they'll be like, what are you talking about? We knew that. But that place, and Jesse, you had talked about how America is such an engine of feeding the world the image it wants. But that's not the world. And that's why stories are so important from so many different perspectives. And if I was able to do that tiny little bit in convincing Alex to move forward on the and then he got into the driver's seat, then I feel that for whatever reason that jumped into my mind and my heart, that story I had to tell. That's the kind of drive that drives everybody in the world. I'm not sure why Mansa Musa became an obsession for me, but the story, I understand that we're storytellers, and the more we tell, intermingle with stories, the more accurate of a picture of the world is possible. Because America, God bless, whatever it is, what it is, as crazy as it is over here now, America's not the world. It's part of the world. And until it learns to be part of the whole, it's going to be an unbalanced picture. And I hope that Alex helped me. I just keep talking.
Yes, I noticed that, but that's a good thing. I just want to say that the universality of the world is the goal that I tend to seek, because the benefits, or I should say, the blessings and the curses of this planet happen to be the human beings on it.
Yeah.
No matter where we're born, what culture, race, creed, color we are, we're human beings. And that comes with a mixture of possibilities and problems. And I wanted Chris to tell that story because Chris grew up in the Bronx and in a neighborhood that was not black at all. And a lot of his friends were what they were and what they still are to some degree. And yet this was something that fascinated him because of who he is and the kind of person that he is. I grew up in an environment where I kept being in my schooling. I think you mentioned Tayo, primary school. So it's elementary
Yeah,
school, middle
elementary.
school, high
Mm,
school were the
that's
labels
right.
that we worked with.
Yeah.
And in elementary school, I had my school completely fooled because they thought I was a gifted kid. So they put me in this gifted class, and I was the only black kid in the class. So for 3 grades of my elementary school life, I was the darkest kid in the room. And all of my fellow classmates were Jewish or Caucasian to that pure Quaker sense of it. And I was coming up with that, yet this is a part of who I am and what I am. So I'm absorbing all these these bits of input of the Jewish persuasion, of Irish, how as a Japanese kid I went to school with. I was getting all of this. I was fascinated by the worldview. I was fascinated by the differences. I didn't see it as a problem. I saw it as, wow, there's this and this, and I'm a part of that. But I was also noticing in the time that I grew up that I wasn't seeing us in
Mm,
99% of the media.
mm,
And when I was growing up, my only hero of color in mainstream media for the first, 15 years of my life was Tonto, the companion to the Lone Ranger. Okay, so
mm.
that's a Native American. Then at some point in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s, as the civil rights movement was happening, we started to get black characters as heroic figures, usually partners, sidekicks, but eventually, yes, they started to take center stage. But what I'm fascinated by is, and this is where I'm going with this, is I'm listening to your stories and how you all came about to the place that you are now. And I'm remembering that in my travels, my global travels, I have met people old and young in Serbia, in Russia, in Sweden, in England, in Denmark, in Mexico, and they've all wondered, where do I fit in and who cares about my stories? Who cares about us? I actually had a Russian student, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Russian student say to me in Russia, does anybody outside of our country even care to hear our stories? And I said to this kid, I'm standing there looking at her, and I said, in my growing up years and in much of my adult years, 99% of what I hear about Russia comes from non-Russians. So don't you think it's time we started to hear it from your POV? And even some of the teachers and librarians and people standing around and suddenly started looking at each other like, oh, that's an idea. This is the power of story. This is what we're talking about now is the power of story and the passion that each one of you has shown us today thus far is the fuel for the ship that you're on. I don't know where we're going to end up at the great moment of, but really it's driven you to accomplish some remarkable things. And I think that's one of the things I hope the audience, both at ECBACC, but also anybody who gets to hear this, I hope that's what they pick up on, that despite the odds, if you have a passion and a will and begin to develop a plan, you can move and push things forward
Mm.
in a very positive way and accomplish a great deal and therefore influence others.
Yeah. I have a big problem now because I love my editorial cartoons a lot. And I'm very well known for my editorial cartoons. But people don't want that these days. They want more of our roots on Black history and informing about Black history in the diaspora. And I realized that as gradually as one gets older, you get now stuck in this successful drawings, educational drawing on Black history. But I'm enjoying it because even like I said earlier on before we got on, we started live. When I was in Israel, all they wanted me to talk about was our roots in Israel. In Tel Aviv, I was with the students at Holland Institute of Design and Technology, and all they wanted was my drawings on Black history, and even the cartoonists and the Cartoonist Association members in Tel Aviv also wanted me to. I went to the Cartoon Museum And the Kijo Kubert, who was my tutor, whose school I went to, actually had his signature on the wall there for various artists around the world. And I was fortunate to sign my name next to his own name on the wall there. So all they were talking about to me was our roots. And I found out that it's quite interesting that our roots is actually educating many. Even my first trip to Philadelphia to go to the ECBACC Cartoon Convention, lots of people said they came there because they knew I was around. I was from the UK. I'm in the UK, and they knew I was around. That's why they came to ECBACC. So I thought, oh, that's not bad. I'm doing good there. But someone has to tell the story. Because if you don't tell the story, people will not know about the story. And that matters a lot. So I'm a storyteller, and then through our roots, I've told lots of stories of sung and unsung heroes, not just the well-known Black heroes, also the unsung ones. I make a story through a journalistic perspective on these people as well, to let the world out there know the achievers all around the world.
Yeah.
ECBACC, I'm sorry, go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to say that ECBACC, the convention you went to in Africa, and the one we went into Russia, the one I've gone to in Denver and all over the world, it should give us fuel and should give us energy to keep telling the stories, because those conventions are a really strong demonstration of the appetite for stories and for different storytelling. ECBACC celebrates the existence and the storytelling ability of people who were shut up for too long, and now it's being attempted again. So the very act of doing this is pushing against that and saying, no, these stories are important, and we have to keep telling them.
To pivot off of that, or not pivot off of, springboard off of that, Micheline, rather, I'll get it right one of these days. I'm curious, in moving forward, do you have any storytelling goals or any kind of vision of something that you want to accomplish next or down the line?
Right now, I'm working on a project that I can't really talk about lest I wake up dead. But I will say
Good
that
title.
my New York Times bestseller. But it's a great story. It's all Black characters, and it's actually a period piece. It's I guess, a historical fiction involving one main character, and I'm really enjoying working on it a lot.
Can you tell us if gender matters in a scenario? Can you tell us anything about the character's gender or anything at all that would give us a peek without revealing anything that's going to be a
I can
problem?
say the gender is male, but as I'm adapting this work, it's not my original character.
Okay.
I'm just creating a graphic novel format of the story based on the character.
Okay.
Yeah. I completely lost track of the bloody question now.
Oh, I was
What
saying,
I would love to work on if I had my druthers is actually going back to using Quill as a storytelling tool. During the pandemic, I picked up VR a little bit before it, actually. I started with the Quest, and one of the things you can do is, if you plug into a PC, there's a storyboarding animation software called Quill, and it's free. And it's incredibly difficult, but it allows you to get a sense of your placement in a 3D world, So you could create comics potentially that are like 3D VR comics. Really excited about being able to kind of mess with that a little bit more. And I think from a standpoint of writing and just a storytelling creation, I would like to get better at writing relationships between characters that feel real and don't feel forced. The interactions or the genesis of the relationship, things like that. And I'm also looking forward to seeing more things like, I think Ianu just came out. By Dawood. Things like that. Yeah, are really exciting. I heard they're casting for Children of Blood and Bone, which is obvious its own drama, hearing about like the choices that they're making. But anyway, yeah, that's my meandering answer to your question.
It was another little walk around the block. It was fine. Jesse?
Yeah, so I think the plan is to just keep telling really strong powerful African stories, continuing to project the culture and the heritage, because that's our identity, that's who we are. Also to help build a sustainable Ghanaian or African animation industry, because animation isn't so big as it is over there for you guys. It's still a growing industry. And if you check the statistics of what comes in as revenue for animation, we haven't even scratched off a tiny bit of what comes in for Africa. And as part of what we do is to help get to a point where we'll be able to build a sustainable animation industry, where the plan is also to use animation for social change. Yes, the kind of stories we will tell. Even though we've got this initiative we started, which is animation for change, and we do short snippets of animations which addresses or tackles social issues. Last year, we did a project together with the UNDP where we put out a series of short animated videos that tackled hate speech. And that was geared towards our upcoming elections. And we know how sometimes elections in our part of the world can end going south. And so we used animation. Yeah, so we used animation to preach or to educate the general public, especially the youth, about hate speech, what that could lead to and how they should avoid that, and blew that up on the social medias and whatnot, because that's where, a lot of young people are sitting. Yeah, and strengthening our ecosystem, basically trying to get a lot more animation studios in the country. Basically, we're just a handful because there aren't, like I said, enough trained people in the space. And so personally, we've started a training program where we train young people who are very excited and interested in animation. We're training them to become animation professionals, and also inspiring the next generation, or the youngest, or the next young generation, to make them understand that animation isn't so far-fetched like they've always thought of it to be, because that was how it was always perceived. And even when our film came out, people thought it was made by white people. And so we had to, yeah, we literally had to line up the entire team in front of the audience of the cinema. Yeah, and even show them video proof that so we recorded bits and pieces of behind the scenes. And that's what we do every time we work on a film, just so that they see. So we show them, we take them along. So right from when we're working on the film, we're working on a project now, which is supposed to come out in December. Usually we would start publicity from sometime June, July, when we've returned from, we do a few festivals around, and that's when we start promotion or publicity. And we take the audience along with us on the journey. We put out snippets and bits of what we're doing in the studio, videos of the guys working, just so they know, this is not done by some white guys. This is done by people. Yeah, and yeah, exactly. So that's how it is. And as soon as these young Ghanaians find out, oh wow.
Oh no. Oh,
Have we lost him?
oh
He's
no,
back. He's back.
He froze for a moment there.
Please continue. You know what? It was probably the damn white guys. All right, continue.
Yeah, once these young Ghanaians find out, oh shoot, this can actually be done right here by people like themselves, they get really excited. And so that's where the training program comes in, where we're training young guys who want to study animation. And we even get people who are coming from the university. We take in interns, we train them, and yeah, and that's the whole point. And basically empowering the young Ghanaian to be able to tell their own stories. Yeah.
I just got to, because one of the things we're not doing in this, unfortunately, is being able to show a lot of the material that you all created. But I want to ask you a couple things, because Jesse, you're in, how do you pronounce it now?
Accra, Ghana.
Accra, okay, Accra, which is, The Guardians is one of yours. And I found myself sitting watching the four episodes, I'm just going, wow, this is so much fun. So,
Yeah,
but one of the things that came to my mind is when we talk about the world perceptions of things as shown through other people's lenses.
yeah,
A lot of the times when people talk about Africa, you get this dry, barren feel. You get a lot of heat and browns and yellows and things like that. And your films are so colorful. It's
yeah,
so rich with color.
yeah,
And I'm
yeah,
just, and accrue the Guardians, because again, that appeals to me. I've done a lot of work with children and young people over the
yeah,
years.
yeah.
So you have, it's a very vibrant, rich
Mm.
visual experience. Just wondering, was that, I'm sure I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Was that a conscious choice when you
Yeah.
were putting this together? And if
Mm.
so, how did that come about?
Yeah, like you said, it's a conscious, deliberate attempt to showcase to the rest of the world. It's not always like they've perceived Africa to be. There are very beautiful stories about Africa or sites that people need to see for themselves. And what better way to do that than through our films? We wanted kids, especially even kids in the diaspora. We get lots of people emailing us, messaging us when they're able to get to watch the film, because you're able to watch the film on our app that we created as well, called Afro Tales Plus, which you can just go on and rent our films and watch that. And you'd have people so excited that after watching, they'll just even want to donate or send you something for just doing what you have done. And like I said, we really wanted kids, especially in the diaspora, to see a different part of Africa that they haven't been told, that they haven't seen, that they haven't perceived. And that was the reason why we chose to showcase. And they're not lies, they are truths. It's not like we're being too futuristic and we're just imagining a whole
Exactly.
different sort of, but what you're seeing are actually sites and landmarks that you would see right here on our streets. And yeah, and we just wanted to showcase Africa in that form. We know
Yeah.
kids will get excited when they see kids that are superheroes, that look like them, that speak like them, that wear clothes like they wear. They really get excited when they see that. And that's basically the whole point. We hear people pass comments like, "Oh, this is the African version of Power Rangers," and that's like the whole idea. So finally, they get to see really awesome characters that are doing
Yeah.
awesome
You
stuff
even
and
went a
being
step further with Umar, and that's a step further because,
yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Yes. And the whole point is to tell you that anybody at all can be a superhero. So then our characters, it was very deliberate. So there's a plus size character that's
mhm.
Na. And then there's Uma, who is deformed. He has one leg amputated. And then once he transforms, he has this cyborg kind of leg. And just to tell everybody that it's an inclusive show, and no matter who you are, where you're coming from,
A good one.
what you're doing, you can also still cause a change in your society, in your community, in your country, whatever. And it just doesn't matter. The fact that you're a disabled person doesn't mean you can't be a superhero. And people really love that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Again, I just wanted to bring that out.
Yeah.
Folks, by the way, when you see this later, when you see this maybe on the Tell the Damn Story channel tomorrow and all that, I will pop in some images so that they will be there
Yeah.
for you to look at, both Teo and Jesse. And Micheline, I would,
Yeah,
yeah.
I just wanted to pop this in on the end, but one of the projects that's coming out in October is the second volume of Shook, Songs of the Dark Sirens. And I'll have a story in that called God's Blood We Deliver, which is about an older retired Black woman who has a rebirth of sorts,
Nice,
becoming a
nice.
delivery person in a kind of zombie vampire infested neighborhood.
Do you have any,
Oh.
do you have any visual images, Micheline, that you can share with me so that I
For
can
that
pop
project?
any of your projects? I would
Oh,
love.
hell yeah.
Oh, please, and
Sorry.
email.
Yeah,
Hey, it's all right. It's all right. It's a PG kind of thing here. But yeah,
watership down is allowed here.
yeah, just email me some images later today so I can get those in. But that
I
was
will.
great. I was Chris, I've interrupted you twice, so go for it.
I just wanted to, I want to get to Teo because he didn't get a chance to answer this one, but I also
Okay.
wanted to mention to Jesse that not that you need to know because you are already doing it, but the importance of showing people that human beings,
Mm.
just like them,
Yeah.
actually do this art.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how stunned I was the day I found out that human beings created the comic books I loved, and that it could be
Yeah.
a job. I was in
Yeah. Yeah.
like a working class
Mm.
neighborhood. Everybody was a fireman or a cop or a mailman, and that someone went to work and drew this or wrote that and it came out. It was somehow beyond, and that
Mm.
it's applicable to movies, to television, to all that. That's possible. And
Mm.
that you're doing
Mm.
internships, and Teo, you were talking about the Kubrick School and the
Yeah.
idea of
Yeah.
going wherever it took
Yeah.
to
Mm.
get there, to
Mm-hmm.
get to your, that there are things out there that allow you to pursue your
Yeah.
passions.
Correct.
I don't
Yeah.
think we can say that enough.
No,
No,
we can't.
that's one of the powers of ECBACC, is that they're saying, look at all these people,
Yeah.
they're doing it.
Yeah.
And it's great that you came on to help spread that, and that
That's right.
ECBACC asked us to be a vehicle for that.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Now,
Mm-hmm.
Teo, you thought maybe he's running at the mouth, maybe I'm off the hook, but no.
I think, like I said, even with what I got from what Jesse said and Micheline as well, is that something keeps us going, and that is because we want to put our stories out there. And I like the angle from Jesse's as well, relating those stories to, so that people in Ghana can relate those stories, those animations, those images to themselves in Ghana. And that's the way of, in fact, I must say that it's through many times I've noticed in American movies, American films, and TV programs as well, that some of the stories coming out of those American TV shows and movies are actually stories from Africa. And I realized that. Do you know that wasn't until recently I realized that Thor in Nigeria, someone wrote me to do a comic on Shango, and Shango in English is like Mighty Thor. Some of the stories, because when we were growing up in Nigeria, we were always being told stories by the moonlight. I think Jesse can understand that. Tales by moonlight, and where they would sit us in the village and they were telling us stories. And I found that very interesting to do and to take from that and develop myself in telling stories as well. So through the years, it's been I've been very productive in that area and being able to tell stories, but relating it to people as well, so that they're not just superficial or superheroes, which they are. They're also stories, true to life stories that can make an impact in the lives of many. And also, most of us are out there as role models as well. Thank God for editors. I've gone through several editors over the years. Without the encouragement, where would I be today? I've gone through several people through the years without them liking my drawings and the things I do. Where would I be today? It takes encouragement. Without ECBA, where would many of the artists be today? But it takes someone with a good, right sense of mind to be able to say, oh, these are the people who have been put to one side, and we need to encourage them. So encouragement helps a lot. And like I said earlier on, Oprah Winfrey said, excellence is the best deterrent to racism and sexism. I've been everywhere. I've been on 4 continents of this world. I've been in South Korea. I was the only Black artist in South Korea. And Israel, which I went to recently, I was the only Black artist there. It's what you do that people like. When they see what you like and they say that it's good, they want to invite you no matter who you are. It's your work they're after, not what you look like. And that has helped me through the years as well.
Two things I want to
be
say, because
undeniable.
I absolutely am right there with you, Teo, on that. When I was in and again, I mentioned a country that right now, just like the United States, there's some good news and there's some bad news. But when I was in Russia, I was invited to go because of a Comic-Con, and I was
Yeah.
there. And so I'm going there, and two things happened that just stuck in my mind and just amazed me. There was a big exhibit at the museum, Moscow Museum in Moscow, obviously. And there's a room full of international artists and people who had traveled with them. Of maybe 300 people, there are 4 blacks. I'm one of them, right? The other 3 are from Africa. One of them is Jeremy. I don't remember Jeremy's last name at the moment, but he's a wonderful artist. He was just in town recently, and we were hanging out. But so we're there, and they're making announcements from the room, and people are giving speeches and things like that. And I keep hearing the American, and then Russian, Russian, the American, the American. So I turn to the person who's my translator, And I said, what are they talking about at this moment? He says, oh, he's introducing the Americans. And I said, oh, okay. And I'm looking around the room. He said, so when you get ready to speak, I'll walk up with you. I said, excuse me? She says, yeah, he's introducing you. You're going to be
Yeah,
speaking.
you're the American.
I wasn't aware that I had to speak here, but okay, I'm not shy about that. So I get up to the microphone and I'm looking around the room, and it occurs to me that as I'm standing there,
Mm,
not only they're representing me and my upbringing and my mother and all that kind of stuff,
mm,
or even representing the comic book world or the exhibits that are going on, anything. I am the only American in the room
mm,
of 300 and some odd people from various other countries. And
mm,
so I am standing there as a representation of this country at the same time.
mm.
And people were
Exactly.
just dealing with me as, oh, so you write Blackjack, you wrote Archie, you do this, you do that. So that was a really defining moment because, and I often, my mother who's passed on some years, I often go, Mom, okay, you got me on this one, right? Because here I go. Because a lot of how I was brought up is how I
Mm.
act now. You
Yeah,
present yourself in a
yeah,
professional way, you present yourself in a
yeah,
dignified way or an ethical way or
mm,
whatever.
yeah,
That's who you are, period.
mm,
So there's
mm,
that. And the other one was I was sitting at a table signing sometime later, and a young gentleman comes up to me with a handful of blackjack, Archies, and other things that
wow,
I've written. And I'm going,
wow,
where did you get these? Oh, on eBay and Amazon. And would you sign? And I am amazed that again, I've never been to this country. I had no idea there was anything of a fan base at all. And here the guys come ready for me to be signing.
mm,
But once again, we tell stories. We
mm,
put our souls and our hearts and our minds into our
mm, mm,
work.
mm,
We are telling stories that have some sort of connection to us as human beings.
mm,
When we put all of that into our stories, when we give it our best, it goes out and it
mm,
resonates with some folks, and you have no idea where they are or what they are. And we really shouldn't give a flying squirrel because
yeah,
ultimately it is still speaking to the fact that we are all human beings. And we, as people of color, have stories to tell just like anybody else.
Yeah.
And so we should
and
definitely be doing that.
And in your experience as well, you could see, and through my experience and experiences of others as well, here, is that people want new things. They're tired of the old, of the same old. They
Yep.
want something new, something refreshing, something exciting, something interesting, something educational, something informative. People are always yearning for new things. And as storytellers, we are the ones that can put out new things from Jesse, from Chris, from Micheline, and yourself and myself, we can continue to do that as well.
As a matter of fact, Chris and
Yeah.
I just realized everything you just said, Teo, ties into Sherlock.
Yeah, that's what we've just done. Yeah.
Yeah, that new book we
Um,
have coming out. Yeah.
is it time for a wrap up? Oh, wait, Micheline has something.
I just wanted to pop one more thing on here, and
Oh,
that
please
is that
do.
I have to disagree to an extent with what Teo said about it not mattering like what you look like as long as your product is rock solid. Because I think if that were the case, artists like Aletha Martinez
Oh,
would be far more well known throughout the comics verse. You know what
Mm,
I like? In my experience, that hasn't always been the case. And a
Okay.
lot of
okay.
times there's been an assumption that as a woman, you're not as adept at people will see what my comics are putting. I remember one time I was sitting there at I think it was a Schaumburg festival, and I was sitting there with my comics in my hands, and someone looked at that and looked at the guy at my table and was like, "Oh, is that your bank?" I'm just
Oh,
basically
wow.
sitting there counting their money. So
Wow.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
been an interesting road at times. I just
Yeah.
it
wanted to
has
kind of
been,
no,
put
no,
it out
you're
there.
Well,
absolutely 100% right,
yeah.
Micheline, because
Yeah.
that's a big cancer in the deal here is people who look at stereotypes or look for stereotypes or function off of
Mm,
stereotypes and therefore ignore possibilities.
yeah.
And very much, I can think of several people who come to my mind in the comic book world, and Aletha being one of them, getting second class citizenship treatment more often
mm,
than not. And that's not good. But I think, again, the fact that she's still doing it, the fact
Mm,
that you're doing it, the fact
yeah.
that so many other women or people of color are doing it, that's just part of our job now because
Mm,
we cannot let the naysayers, those who are blind, those who want to erase accomplishments and erase history and go back to some sort of compressed, oppressive scenario. No, you don't get to do that without a fight. You just don't. Yeah.
That's that. We're overcoming their fears.
Yeah.
Alex, is it time to wrap? 'Cause
Yeah,
I have
it is, unfortunately. Yeah.
I have a statement and a two-question for everybody.
Go for it.
One, what I used to say to my students has been borne out again by this panel. I always told them, you're taught that you need three things to survive: water, food, and air. And then some kind of safety, of course. I always said water, food, air, and story. We need story to find ourselves, to find each other, to discover and learn about the world. So my wrap up is, one, can each of you tell the people at ECBACC, the people that tell the damn story, and anyone else who in the world who gets to see this, where they can find your work? That's A. And B, inspired by Micheline, can you recommend someone else for them to search out and check out their work as well? All right, so we'll spread the love, right? Where can they find your work, and who else should they look for? All right, let's start with Tayo.
I think can
Let me
find my
just
work.
put you right on the spot.
Can find my work. Can find my work a lot on TikTok and on various social media platforms. In fact, I must say that that's another way of putting out your work there. Social media, various social media platforms. I use them for the right reasons, and I put drawings on TikTok and find the right music to accompany my cartoons, and that's. And I have thousands and thousands of views on TikTok.
What name
as
or
well.
handle should we look for on TikTok?
Yeah, I don't know that one, but I know I'm also on Instagram, tfatunla123 / You can find me there, or www.tayo, Tayo Fatunla, Fatunla.
Cool.
That's BT, yeah, .com, Tayo Fatunla, www.tayofatunla.com. On Facebook, said Instagram, LinkedIn, so many of them. We lost count now. All you have to do is search for Tayo Fatunla.
There you go.
You can catch me.
And who else? Who would you recommend they check out? Who else? Somebody other than this panel here that you might say, you know what, this person's work is worth searching for.
I think Jerry Craft.
Yeah.
Yes.
Jerry's great. Yeah.
And Dawood as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also would like to just ask anyone at the convention that let them implore them to just be resilient and continue, keep at it. Don't be discouraged. Yeah. The future is better than the beginning, but don't be discouraged. Keep at it. If that's what you want to do, keep at it and don't give up. Take no for an answer and go on to the next person who might like your work.
Yeah, there you go. Excellent.
Jesse, how about you? Where can people find your work, and who would you recommend they also check out?
Okay, all right. We're quite active on social media, so you can search Mills Media _ on Instagram. We're quite active on Instagram. You find a lot of activities there, or millsmedia.co.
Okay.
Yeah, you'd find everything about us there. Or you could just search Jesse Sunkwa-Mills.
There you go.
Yes, there's quite a number of stuff that would pop up. Yeah. And about recommendation, maybe because of what Micheline highlighted about the comic artist Dalitha, I was just checking out her work while we were chatting, and I think she's really awesome. I didn't know she worked for Wakanda. I would also like to recommend a fellow animator, a female animator, to put her on the spotlight too. Yeah, she's Karen Harpork.
PH
Studios on Instagram. Yes, she's also a good female storyteller or animated Black from Ghana, trying to do her best. So yeah.
Excellent. Excellent.
And sorry, that's a good one. Sorry, Chris. That's a good one as well. We need to encourage female artists and writers as well. And we have a few of them from Africa as well to help them promote their works as well, just like Jesse has done. We see great women coming up, but they need to be encouraged as well.
So let me do this. Let me just do this before we give Micheline her moment. both of you send me an email with the names of any people that you want to recommend,
Okay.
and
We'll
we
put a
will
scroll
post
on.
and we will do all that on TDDS. We will
Yes,
absolutely.
excellent.
Fantastic. That's
All
great.
right. Now, everyone's been biting their nails and waiting. What does Micheline have to say? And now is the moment.
You can find my work at my website. It's mishmasharts.com. That's MICHMASHARTS. Mishmash Arts, not Mishmash Sharts. Don't get cute. My Instagram handle is the same, and my YouTube channel is the same as well.
Spell that one again, please.
Can you do that again, please?
MICHMASHARTS.
Yes.
T.
That's really clever name.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mishmash.
So who else would you recommend?
I would recommend Greg Elise. He does Webway Comics, and he has an incredible lineup of superheroes. He's a writer, and he creates stories. Anansi the Were-Spider, and like every other second I turn around and he's got another project coming out. He's very passionate and hardworking with what he does. He's always trying to put other artists on. And he's just an all-around awesome person. I think he's probably there because I think I saw a picture that
That's cool.
I'm going to embarrass
recently,
myself.
so, yeah.
I'm going to embarrass myself and say that his sister is a phenomenal
Blossom.
artist. Blossom Blair.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah, she is something else. She's done some nice stuff. And both she and Greg have attended Kids Comic Con. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool. Now the ECBACC audience has a shopping list, which is really great. Get out there and get some of this stuff.
Yeah, if you guys would, again, email me all of this, your social media handles and everything, and then the names of anybody that you want to recommend, and I will make sure that's all in this episode, which I'm going to have a lot of work to do tonight.
And that's what I live for, everybody, to make his life as difficult as possible.
Micheline, are you on Instagram? Micheline, are you on Instagram?
Yeah, my art, it's Mishmash Arts.
Yes,
handle.
And Jesse, what did you say yours is again, please?
Sorry, it's Mills Media _. Yeah.
Media _ yeah. Oh, that's it.
Underscore. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. He leaves us hanging like that. Right?
Talk to you later.
Again, I want to thank everybody for being here, including those at ECBACC. ECBACC, thank you so much for making this possible. Micheline, we're both in New York, so we got to hang at some point.
You keep saying that.
Oh yeah, I'm going to keep saying it until it happens. It happens. When it happens, I'll stop saying it. Or maybe
make it happen.
Yeah, make it happen. Yeah. And don't take 12 years like it took me and you, bro.
Yeah, this guy lives across the bridge. We didn't see each other for 10 years, but we're doing the show every week. Yeah. So anyway, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Chris, as always, absolutely.
Always an honor, yeah.
It was nice to meet you,
ECBACC,
Tayo and Jesse and Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
It was an honor to meet you all. It was an honor to talk to you. Thank you.
All the best.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.